Hurricane Almanac 2006. I have a picture of this up on the screen right now for people to see the front page. This book is about 270 some odd pages, and what I like about this book, and I read a lot of hurricane books. I have shelves full of them, and your book covers just about everything. I mean, some books are telling a story about a particular hurricane, or they're talking about the science behind hurricanes, or they're talking about strictly climatology or historic hurricane. Yours covers everything in one from cover to cover, and in fact, the one section in here that pertains to our system in the Western Caribbean right now is your hurricane science section. It's the second section of the book, and you mention about how fronts can act as triggers and upper level lows as triggers, and subtropical storms and depressions forming. So I think this is a real valuable thing to have in a book here, especially when you look at cold fronts coming down, because a lot of people have questions about how hurricanes form. And I really enjoyed that section probably the most in the book. But you have the very first section in your book is about hurricane history, and I love this. I'm a hurricane history buff, and you go back and talk about all the areas, past hurricanes that have hit certain areas, and what areas are at high risk, or what could happen when hurricanes come into these areas. What do you think about the worst case disaster here for the United States? What, in your mind, what do you think would have to happen for a disaster to be worse than what we saw in New Orleans, anywhere in the United States?
Well, I mean, the area in South Florida and New York City and the Houston area could easily have a disaster happen that is worse than what we saw in Katrina, because the areas are so much more populated. When you talk about the risk associated with some kind of event, what you're talking about is the odds that event might happen times the consequences. You multiply odds times consequences and you get the risk. So, for example, in New York City, the odds of having a strong hurricane hit New York City are very low. They're not zero. I mean, it's happened in the last couple hundred years a few times. But the odds still are low, but the consequences are unimaginable. The amount of damage and the effect on the countries and the world economy is just staggering. In southeast Florida, as we found out with Hurricane Wilma, you have a relatively weak hurricane, Category 1 in most of South Florida, Category 2 in some spots, and you have the third most damaging hurricane in history, $20 billion hurricane. It just shows you what happens when a hurricane hits a densely populated place like metropolitan southeast Florida. So there, when you talk about Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and Palm Beach County, there in that situation you have relatively high odds of a strong storm hitting and major consequences, not the same kind of consequences as a New York hit, but still very high consequences. So there the risk is very high for that reason. You get to other places like Tampa and Houston, they don't have the same odds that southeast Florida has, but you certainly have significant odds, and you have moderately high to very high consequences. For instance, in the Houston area, the consequences are extremely high, and historically in Texas, on the coast of Texas, of course, they've had a number of devastating hurricanes over the last couple hundred years. So, these are the places. It's hard to since it is you have to multiply those two. There's the product of those two factors, odds versus consequences. And the fact is that in any given year or any given decade, we really don't know the odds because we don't have 1,000 years or 2,000 years of hurricane history to look back on to where we really could have a feeling of what the odds are in any one year at any spot on the coast. So we have to make a guess at that, and as a result of that, the answer to the question is where is the most, the highest risk is impossible to say. But you make a guess and you say somewhere New York City, the Northeast of New England, South Florida, Tampa, New Orleans, Houston seem like the best candidates.
Yeah, and also New York, I read a report today on our message board. Somebody posted about the 25-foot wall of water that could potentially swallow up New York City. Some story. I didn't read all the details on it, but the chances for a New Orleans-type disaster are pretty decent, considering if you look at the ocean levels rising and I know you probably don't want to get into the subject, but the global warming issue with the potential warmer ocean sea surface temperatures creating stronger hurricanes, we could see disasters repeated where they're going to get magnified as each one comes ashore, depending on how populated an area it hits, just like you said. But by the way, I have the toll-free number up on the screen. If you'd like to if you have a question for Bryan Norcross tonight, call up on the toll-free number 888-372-8890. And we only have one line open, so if you call and you just get put through to the machine, just hang up and try again in 5 or 10 minutes. I have an email here from somebody that could not watch the show tonight, but they said that they did read your book. He says, if you have a chance, let Bryan know that I have my 12-year-old daughter. She read your book before they moved down here. They live over in Naples. And it was a great help. She was afraid of hurricanes, and I think with the knowledge she gained on how to prepare and deal with them, she gained the confidence to face her fear and now listens to your updates with me. Keep up the great work, and it was from Kevin. So they've read your book.
Oh, great, Kevin. Thanks very much.
And I know your book is, I found your book in the mall at the, I think it was Borders Books or one of those mall bookstores, and I know your book is at the big chains too as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty much everywhere in the country. I think that I know people that have gotten it in California and in New York, and I know I've seen it in the bookstore up in New Hampshire, and of course it's available online. And there's also a website that goes with it, which is kind of important, by the way, because there are a few things about the website. One is that through just my editing after the fact, and also through a lot of readers sending me emails, the website updates some of the pages and actually caught a few things that I said that I didn't mean to say or weren't clear, one or the other. And so the actual page numbers there are updated on the website. And also you can get the book on the website, hurricanealmanac.com. Goes with, Hurricane Almanac 2006. And also we found some pretty good hurricane supplies that I really like, and they're on the website as well.
Yeah, I'm going to get to that chapter too, because I get such a charge out of that comment you made about the UPSs beeping like crazy on your computers when the power goes out. And I went through that with Gene and Francis. It was maddening because I have one for each computer and I have 4 of them in here, so it was like a beeper convention in here. It was driving me nuts. By the way, if you don't want to call in, you can email jim@hurricanecity.com. In fact, we have a couple of them here. This is from Darrell. He's in Louisiana. He says he bought your book. It should be the Hurricane Preparedness Bible for people who live in the hurricane zone. He's absolutely right. Another section I really like in your book is the myths, hurricane myths, and the number one thing, and my father-in-law comes down here, and he's an old-timer that went through the 1938, the Long Island Express, and, they were in the old school of crack a window on the lee side of the house, that whole thing, and you have a whole explanation of what happens to your house when this happens, and I'm going to show this to him when he comes down here next. We have these screaming matches over this. I say, yeah, go ahead and open a window, because he lives in Daytona now. And I keep saying, when one comes up there, a significant hurricane, and you do that, you're going to just open up a can of worms. And he's, you crack a window. It's the pressure, internal combustion, the whole 9 yards.
Right. Because you have this sense, and anybody that goes through a hurricane will tell you that you have this sense of pressure on your ears. And so people think that their houses are being pressurized when actually they're not. It's actually the inside of your body that's pressurized relative to the air outside. So it's the air trapped in your eustachian tubes and other parts of your pulmonary system pushing out, and gases in your joints pushing out that gives you a sensation of pressure. so that by opening a window in the back of the house, you actually lower the pressure in your house, and you actually make the situation worse, not better. So, it's a sort of a physiological response to the hurricane that creates a psychological response.
Yep. Now, what do you think about these, while we're on the subject of myths, and I don't know if you touched on the screen. I think it's in the back, towards the back of the book, where you talk about the screening you can hang in front of windows. I don't know. When I go to the conferences and I see all these products, Category 5 rated, we can handle anything you can throw at it, I'm always a little skeptical of this stuff, thinking, okay, well, how did you test this, first of all, with Category 5 winds? And I know they have this wall of wind from the FIU down there.
Right.
They're experimenting with this, but I don't know how these other companies test all their products against Category 5 winds, but to me, a net in front of your window just doesn't seem very safe to me. I don't know, maybe you have a different opinion on that. Do you think all these new things they have out now are really Category 5 ready?
Well, first of all, I don't think any of them are Category 5 ready necessarily, because too many things can go wrong in a Category 5 hurricane. But if they meet the Dade County standards, they have the Miami-Dade County Product Approval Certification, that means they have been physically tested at a very rigorous standard. And to answer your question about the screening, there are two different kinds of screening. There's one kind that kind of mounts away from the house and makes kind of a tent. And that kind is very good, very strong, and excellent for garage doors. Because what happens with that is that you have that angle of approach, so the way the air is kind of deflected away from your house, and it actually lowers the pressure behind it. For instance, if you have a relatively weak garage door, it's an excellent kind of a shutter. But they sell the same basic material that mounts directly on the face of the house. In other words, it doesn't go away from it like a tent, like in where the base is a couple of feet out. It actually mounts around the window and connects all the way around. And that stuff has some value, but not anywhere near to the same degree, because big pieces of debris, like roof tiles or something, are going to deflect that right to the window and break the window. So while it would stop small debris, it wouldn't stop big debris from breaking the window. And of course, that's the goal. That's why the kind that is away from the house at an angle, and even if it deflects, it can't get all the way to either the door or the window. That's why those pass the rigorous test.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, I guess we'll see when a Cat 5 comes. It looks good on paper, and we can blow fans at it and stuff. But we'll have to see when the real thing hits here. And I always think about this when we think about the 1940s. How many major hurricanes came plowing through South Florida, and how much trouble we've had dealing with these. And I don't want to minimize them, but they've been Category 1s and 2s for the most part. We've been feeling those kinds of winds, and people are freaking out. They're losing control. They're sweating it when these hurricanes are coming at us. And could you imagine if we had a rash like the 40s come through here? And it could very well happen still. It's just going to be really interesting, and I'm sure you feel the same way. It's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. When we do have Cat 4s and 5s coming through here.
Oh, there's nothing good about it. If we had another sequence like we had from 1945 to 1950 with 5 major hurricanes in 6 years, and other hurricanes on top of that, there are other periods. I've just been doing research on the 1906 season, where there were 3. That would have been a time where we would have gotten all geared up 3 times for storms in the neighborhood, 2 major hurricanes and 1 Category 1. There are numerous years in the past with multiple hurricanes, of course 1926 being the most famous. In 1926 there was a hurricane in July, there was the monster hurricane in September, and then there was another big hurricane scare in October. The hurricane kind of did a tremendous amount of damage in Havana, right, and then was heading right toward Miami, and everybody was just scared to death, as they would be again today. And there was a tropical storm that year as well. So, you get these scenarios where Mother Nature is kind of in a rut and aims all the hurricanes at a given spot. In the 40s and, in the 1954, 1955 seasons, it was all eastern North Carolina and up the East Coast.
Right.
So, this happens, has happened in the past, it's going to happen in the future, and nobody, individuals or the government, is prepared, to deal with the effect, the physical and psychological effects of having to deal with that.
I'm surprised at how many people believe that. I've had people tell me, the winds were 140 miles an hour when Wilma came through.
Right.
They don't understand. Of course, I measure it on my anemometer up here. It's an unobstructed tower, so I get the instrument readings after each hurricane, and then I have arguments with the neighbors about it. But they, a sustained wind of 80 or 90 miles an hour is a tremendous amount of wind.
Right.
And they think it's major hurricane, and it's not. And when one does come in, the wind velocity is going to be, they're going to be hiding under their dining room tables. I mean, I don't really know how else to describe it. But my question is, this has come up in the message board from time to time, is what is the force of wind compared to, between a Category 1 and a Category 2? It's not just twice the amount. Like, for example, 75 miles an hour versus 150. It's not just twice as much. Isn't there like
4 times?
4 times.
4 times, right. But, here's a way to think about it that I use. And you just tell people, imagine if you got out on the roof of your car, driving up I-95, and you stood up on top of the roof of your car. Now you got the car going to 70 or 75 miles per hour. You would realize that standing there would probably not be possible at 70 or 75 miles per hour. Well, that's just barely at hurricane strength, right? So if you can stand, you don't have a hurricane. That's generally the rule.
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
Right? And so if you get up to 100 miles an hour in your car, you have no prayer of even, you'd have a hard time even hanging on.
Yeah.
So, that kind of makes people get a feeling for wind speed, and I think helps sometimes realize that we throw around big numbers all the time, but really they're not real. The tremendous amount of damage is done by 90-mile-an-hour hurricanes all the time.
Yeah. I have these big blowers I use for my business, and they're 3 wheels. They're on the ground, and they blow winds 110 miles an hour. When you stand or try to walk in front of one of these things, it'll knock your feet out from underneath you. If you're not, you can walk in front of it if you walk real fast in front of the opening, which is only about maybe 6 inches in diameter. But it will literally blow your feet off to the side when you're standing in front of that. So I can only imagine your whole body in front of something like that. It would just take you and fling you. It wouldn't even...
Yeah, you can't stand up. No, you can't stand up in a real sustained wind. And in actual fact, you don't ever have a real sustained wind, as you can tell by looking at the wind trace, off of an anemometer after a hurricane. And so what you get is these kind of surge, and of course that makes it harder to stand up because you kind of lean into it, and then it lets you go, and then it pushes hard again. And of course that's why it actually causes more damage than just a continuous wind would be, because if a wind is blowing against something, that doesn't create the same kind of damage as a wind that surges all the time. It's just like if you wanted to knock down a door, you wouldn't just lean against it, you'd run and hit it, and you'd run and hit it, right? And you'd weaken it, and then you weaken it some more and weaken it some more. That's just that's the way the physics works. And, of course, hurricanes do that. Anybody that was in Hurricane Andrew, most people I talk to say, oh, it was the gust. I felt it. I felt the gust, and that's when the door blew in.
Yeah.
That's when the damage is done, the same way of trying to knock down a door with your body.
Well, you have a section in your book here, How I Do It Better, and I found these some really, really interesting comments you made in the back of the book here. First, which is let me start again here, reading this, just to make sure I get this right. You would like to see the word hurricane alert used instead of
hurricane watch. Well, because I have, been in the news business a long time, and to this day, people that work in the newsroom can't sort out in their mind the difference between watch and warning. And everywhere I go, and just people in the public cannot sort out those two things because they are so similar. And I just think I'm not saying that alert is the best option, but it appeals to me. Other places use it. They use a similar word in Spanish for hurricane watch, and actually they used to use alert a long time ago to distinguish these things. So I picked that word, but I'm not married to that word. The main thing is I just think that either watch or warning needs to be changed, and the logical thing is to change watch.
All right, you have a lot of things you'd like to do differently, and we don't have enough time tonight to talk about all of them, but I like your idea of having an official station for the aftermath information. Now, I know they started doing that up here in Boca. They have a station, I believe it's 13, 4, or 6, I don't know what the call letters are, but it's a station in Boca that strictly turns over to all hurricane when there's a hurricane coming. Mm-hmm. But I'm uncomfortable with stations using official hurricane information station. I've heard this on numerous radio stations and television stations, and I think it sends up a mixed signal to people. They don't know where the heck the official hurricane information station is, and wouldn't there be competitiveness between the stations to become that?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, I am 100% opposed to people, to radio stations or television stations using words like official as purely a promotional word. Because the fact is that they can't be the official station because there's no guarantee that they're even going to operate. I mean, the problem, the emergency communications system in the United States is just a disaster. We just don't have one. It's not like in other countries that have thought this out, and they actually have. For instance, in Britain, the BBC is an independent organization, but the government essentially sort of takes it over during an emergency. And so they have these, then you do have an official station. But we don't have a comparable entity in the United States. So it's a challenging thing. There's no good way that emergency information is distributed. So many people are misinformed or partially informed or uninformed because the communications mechanisms are crude or dysfunctional. There's just a tremendous amount of work to do in that area, and actually I'm spending a lot of my time now working on those sorts of problems.
Yeah, and you have a mention here about color coding certain areas for tourists, so they know where to go, how far away from the coast they have to go, like a red zone for... can you explain a little about that, the color coding idea you have?
Well, the idea is that, the evacuation zones are normally color-coded, but yet there is no physical color coding on the ground. I think that what should happen is there should be a sign that says you're now entering a red evacuation zone, or you're now entering an orange evacuation zone. And then when you get into tourist areas, the street sign should be labeled with a little red band or a little orange band. So then it's just a matter on the media of saying, if you're not sure, go out and look at your street sign and see what color band is on there, and then you'll know. And if an evacuation is ordered for the red zone, then you'll know that you need to evacuate. Because right now, if I ask, I live in Miami Beach, and my neighbors, they don't have any idea. People don't, and the people especially on the mainland, just don't have any idea if they live in evacuation zones or not. They know that they might, but they don't know if evacuation orders apply to them. There is no mechanism for describing these zones. Emergency managers will say, oh, well, we say east of Federal Highway, but just think of yourself and you've traveled to the south of France or something, and if somebody said there, oh, you have to evacuate if you're south of Autoroute Van Nuys, whether you would have any idea where that is in comparison to you. You wouldn't possibly. So it's especially bad for tourists, but I've also found that a lot of these dividing lines that they choose, like in Broward County, they'll choose Oakland Park Boulevard or something. Well, you know, you have to, if you're an elderly person and you don't drive, you may not know where Oakland Park Boulevard is compared to you.
Yeah, and a lot of road maps, they just give it as a number.
As a number, and all these sorts of complications that I don't think that the emergency management community thinks this out very well. And one of the ways to start the process is if it's a red evacuation zone, make sure that people, when they drive, know that they're in a red zone, and when they go to an orange zone, let them know that too.
So you keep up the great work, WFOR, and we'll catch. You know, we stream you when you're doing your live hurricane coverage. Of course, there hasn't been much to talk about.